Welcome to the Ageless Traveler, the #1 resource for active 60-plus travelers. Discover the most exciting destinations, the deepest discounts, and make new like-minded friends. Did you know that the NIH recently reported that travel increases your longevity? This episode of the Ageless Traveler is brought to you by Cruises.it, the most comprehensive ocean and river cruise site to book all your cruising needs. Receive the deepest discounts and perks beyond what is offered by the cruise lines themselves. Once you book, you are alerted if your cruise price drops, so you never pay a penny more than the lowest possible price. Now here's Adrienne Berg, host of the Ageless Traveler.
Hello. This is Adrienne Berg, and this is the Ageless Traveler. And today we have our ultimate show on the ageless in Ageless Traveler. I'm very aware everywhere I go and every time I go how important it is to be healthy. It makes all the difference in the world. In fact, it's base one if you do want to never stop traveling. I attended Raadfest, and I've been telling you about that, a conference on longevity. Some people even say it's a conference on immortality, but I concentrate living longer, healthier, also called health span. And I struggled, I really did, to decide which of the many things that I heard and attended during this conference would be useful to you. And I've selected two of them for two separate interviews. You'll be hearing them both on this show. One with Bernard Siegel, who created the World Stem Cell Summit. Because stem cells is right now part of medical tourism, if it is simply to live longer, healthier. So you will hear what he's accomplished, but also some of the consumer reviews, things you might want to ask if you did decide about that kind of tourism. And then we go into an entirely different discussion with Aubrey De Grey. He brought together at that conference many scholars and many geroscientists to discuss breakthroughs. And he says, in fact, most of it is up to the public and their attitude about how long they want to live and how healthy they want to be. I say, if you have life purpose, if you love to travel, if you have friends and family around you, you have to be a longevitist. You have to do the things that keep you alive and healthy while being so. If you have lost your life purpose, if you feel marginalized, if ageism means to you that you become irrelevant, well, why do some of the harder and sometimes expensive things you need to do to live longer? So to me, it's up to us. And that's what the Ageless Traveler Consortium of friends who love to travel is all about. Enjoy the show. So let's start, Bernard Siegel, with a little bit about your organization, because it truly is global. Tell us a bit about the organization, and then I want to discuss stem cells from the consumer point of view.
Right. So I run the Regenerative Medicine Foundation, and for 23 years worked with it and created and conceptualized the World Stem Cell Summit, an annual meeting that brought in all stakeholders. But that community is very involved as one of the pillars of the healthy longevity movement. And by bringing in all the knowledge of the stakeholders there, we've been able to grow this large consortium where we are declaring in the loftiest way that healthy longevity, health span, should be declared a fundamental human right for all populations. And all of this is meritorious, and it involves policy, industry, science, patients. It's a vast cross-sector coalition. So that's where we're involved in. So regenerative medicine, I prefer, rather than stem cells, let's call it regenerative medicine. The idea that you're going to be able to regrow injured parts of your body with cells, and how remarkable that is. And maybe one day replace organs or reverse aging, that bring back cells and add mitochondria or what other parts of the cell that is needed to live longer and healthier. It's remarkable. And the science, with all the converging technologies, with AI, data, and analytics, this is now more than just a gleam in the eye. These technologies and converging technologies might happen. So what about those folks that seem to be jumping the gun and using that stem cells? It's actually became a consumer movement, Adrienne. We were so successful in promoting stem cells the ordinary person on the street. Do you want stem cells? Sure, I want stem cells. It's for myself, my loved ones, my friends. I can go to my local deli, Adrian, and next door there's a Pilates studio that says Pilates, and underneath it says stenciled on the windows, stem cell injections.
Yeah.
Do I want to go to my Pilates studio for a stem cell injection? No, I don't, because I know some of the questions that you need to ask, and you have to be very careful because a lot of things haven't been proven to be safe and effective.
So let's take a look at that situation from the point of view of what's available legitimately to people today. Now, first of all, there has been a lot of progress, scientific progress. There has been regeneration of eyesight, but they have been in animals and mice, and now they're looking at higher level animals, not in humans. So what is really available today is stem cell injections. Also, in my case, my kids, when they had a baby, they had some stem cells preserved. You can do that in the United States, almost in every hospital. So there has been a lot of progress and a lot of thinking. But what's going on today with medical tourism and stem cells are injections. And at this conference, this Raadfest conference, I asked every single vendor that is from another country and has a holistic center what it would cost. And they all gave me figures in the $20,000 range. I have to say this. I still don't know what they're injecting. And I still don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea if the money was there. And then, of course, if it is a good idea, for how many people is the money there? So I'm going to use you as my consumer reports. So let's start here with the U.S. What is available on our shores that has been sanctioned? And if somebody is interested and they don't want to go to the Pilates next door, right, which also offers Botox and everything else you could think of, where would you go that you think is a legitimate way to approach this?
Well, first of all, there are clinical trials, as you know, that are FDA sanctioned that will look at safety and efficacy on the way to an approved cell therapy for you. But what if you have an urgent situation? Well, there's expanded use, expanded access, where the FDA can possibly let you use cells that have passed safety from the FDA. But the key is this: these stem cell clinics that have opened up, are they really giving you stem cells or not? And if you don't have a way of knowing where that bag of cells came from, has it been cells taken from a clean laboratory, sanctioned as a laboratory approved by the FDA? Does the bag of cells that are going in, injected into you, have living cells? Well, what if they don't? Now, there's a lot of data that's being produced and in clinical trials and otherwise that are showing that there are real prospects with this to, in certain cases, especially I will say in orthopedic situation, clinical trial that they're doing with extracting with a medical device and extracting something called mesenchymal stem cells from fat, from adipose tissue, and then injecting it in the knee. And looks like from the clinical trials that are going on that you can defer or never need a knee replacement if you can get this therapy. But it's not available in the United States yet, really. So people, the first thing I look at, is it legal in the jurisdiction that you're at, in the state? If you're in the United States, in the 50 states, you have to ask the question, is it FDA approved? Is this a clinical trial? There are questions that you need to ask to be a consumer. Now, you can find a little consumer guide at healthspanaction.org. But before you jump into a cold plunge or buy something that is going to wear on your head to put some magical brainwaves in, right, if you're a biohacker, not that isn't some really cool stuff that they're selling. What is the treatment and how does it work? What's the mechanism of action? What are the expected benefits for your condition and your goals? What are the potential side effects? Do you put any of this in writing? What is the success rate? And they can tell you, but what is the proof of their success rate? Will the progress be monitored, and how about follow-up care? That's a great weakness in some of these clinics, international clinics. You go, you're one and done with this very expensive treatment. And where's the follow-up? What if you fall ill? So how do you know what cells are being used? Are you working with a medical doctor, a licensed medical provider? Has this been sanctioned? How is your progress, Adrian, going to be monitored? What about if there's a need for follow-up care? What are the costs? Are there any payment plans or insurance? What type of cells or regenerative medicine products are you using? Here's another thing. How experienced is the provider with the procedure? How do you know the cells are being placed where they're needed? You ask these questions. These are absolutely legitimate questions. There should be no embarrassment at this. What's the source of the cells, and how are they harvested and processed? Are the treatments FDA compliant or part of a clinical trial? Now, these are for all sorts of different types of treatment. And, is there scientific evidence? Who's doing the advertising? I was when we were in Raadfest, you remember, we went to the airport, there was this giant billboard that said stem cells right at the entranceway. Well, just because they say they're stem cells doesn't mean that they're tied in with an academic institution. They could be injecting anything into you. Having said that, I had the pleasure of introducing a grandchild of dear friends who had cerebral palsy. And the little boy was 2 years old. He couldn't sit up. He couldn't lift a toy. He couldn't use his right arm. They went to Dr. Joanne Kurtzberg at Duke University, enrolled in the expanded use. They were able to inject those cord blood cells that you mentioned.
Yes.
Cord blood cells and dosed the little boy. And a few months later, he can pick up a little toy train and put it on the track where he couldn't move before. Now he's crawling around the house. Now he's babbling. And it's a miracle to that family. So there's a way to do this the right way. And there's a follow-up. And the data will be preserved and used for medical studies. These are the types of things you should be looking for with the academic centers first. And not just, it's one thing to look at the Google information or Perplexity or AI. Another thing to watch, be careful about those that are advertising. Those that are advertising aren't necessarily, just because they have a big advertising budget and big price tag for the treatments, I question what you're getting there.
They can be red flags. Yeah. I have my 3-part rule because I do medical tourism. I do it for dentistry, and people know that. And I also do it in Bangkok, which has a very particular hospital called Bumrungrad. And that's for prevention and taking tests. So my 3 roles are very similar to yours, but they're even more consumer oriented because I'm not in the world of providing or advocating for a particular kind of treatment. One is, if it's cheaper, why? If the healthcare or the dentistry is exactly the same, but you have less overhead, that's fine. That's just like any other way of saving money. The second question is, who owns the group? What are their credentials? Is it a conglomerate corporation and you would never be able to find the real name of the owner? Or is it a doctor who might even be a U.S., Canadian, German doctor with a reputation? So that's the second one. Who's the owner of the establishment? So important. And the third one is what you mentioned. What is the aftercare like? Look, with Zoom, there is no excuse for not being able to see your doctor, even the ones in Bangkok. You can see them every day. It happens to be on the computer, but you can see them no matter where you are. If there is no aftercare, there is no reason to go there. So that's my 3 basics. And before we leave you on this one, because we are going to be talking about other things that we saw at Raadfest that were interesting, but before we go, I have this question for you and the organization. Now, you, of course, are an advocate.
Yes.
So for consumer education, what is the best way and the best way for a consumer to read? Maybe we should write stem cells for dummies. I don't know. It's out there. What would you read if you want to know more about stem cells?
I would go to the National Institutes of Health website, but also you can go to some scientific societies that are really good and have a consumer page, like the International Society for Stem Cell Research, the International Society for Cell Therapies.
Well, we thank you so much. And don't you guys go anywhere, because we're going to have a little bit more of a discussion when we come back about longevity so that we can put and keep the ageless in the Ageless Traveler. Do you have a question about travel? Or would you like to travel with us in 2026 to Japan? Well, in either case or both, please contact me. You can do that by text or voicemail at fabulous.com/ageless traveler. You'll find that on our website under podcasts and, of course, in the show notes. Today we have somebody with us who's been telling the truth about aging for a very long time. Who's listening to him? Well, now people are listening to him. And he has a wonderful name. I always call him Aubrey De Grey, but there's better than that. It's Aubrey David Nicholas Jasper De Grey. And he is an English author, a biomedical gerontologist. He is the author way back in 1999 of the Mitochondrial free radical theory of aging. And in 2007, Ending Aging. He has been scrabbling for a long time now for people to really look at aging in a very different way.
Yeah, so first of all, Adrian, thank you so much for having me on the show again. It's really great to be here. It is all about preventing and postponing the chronic diseases of late life. That's what we're about. We're about keeping people healthier longer. People often focus too much on lifespan. To me, it's all about actually just keeping people healthy, and lifespan is a side effect of that, right? It's a question of, first of all, what works already, and second of all, what is close enough to working. We have a few things that some promise of very mildly postponing the health problems of late life, and that's a hell of a lot better than nothing. So I'm not in any way dissing that. I'm not in any way saying that should be ignored. But the fact is, it's not the Holy Grail. We need to be looking beyond that and figuring out what we can develop that does not yet exist, that has the potential to postpone the health problems of late life a great deal more. And I don't believe that it's just a matter of potential. I believe that it's highly likely that we'll be able to do this. And that's the focus of my own work.
When I speak to gerontologists, they say exactly what you do, which is we don't have anything yet, but eat right, exercise, have life purpose, and keep your eye on the prize,
I say eat right, do what your mother told you to. I do say that, but I additionally say that we are within striking distance of doing far, far more. And pretty much all of my colleagues are very reluctant to say that. They will say, well, in the fullness of time, we would like to do more, but they will absolutely not put any time frames on it, even probabilistic time frames. And I think that's frankly irresponsible. I believe that those of us who are experts in the field have a duty, a public duty, to actually stick our necks out and put a number on how likely we think it is that we will make this or that amount of progress in this or that amount of time. And of course, different people will have different numbers there, but everybody, I believe, has a duty to come out with their own numbers. And
so what is your number? What is your number?
Right, so my number. So first of all, let me define what my number is about. So of course, you have to define that, right? You have to say what is the milestone that you are talking about. The milestone that I talk about is something I've called longevity escape velocity. Mm-hmm. This is, broadly speaking, this is the point where we have postponed aging enough that we have a good chance of continuing to postpone aging with subsequent developments faster than time is passing. In other words, we can take the same people who've benefited from the first generation therapies, and they'll still be around and able to benefit from the second generation therapies, which will be more sophisticated, and so on and so on. And I believe that we are, with 50% probability, we are only about 15 years away from that. We could get there even sooner, though I don't think we have any chance really of getting there all that much sooner. And I certainly believe that we have at least a 10% chance of not getting there for 100 years if we hit all manner of, unforeseen obstacles.
Right.
But I think 50% probability is quite enough to be worth fighting for, and I'm putting 15 years on that.
So this is what I want to bring home to everybody listening. Those people who are thoughtful with regard to reversing the diseases of aging, but I'll say something a little bit different. Reversing the possibility that you will get those diseases of aging so that you can continue to live long and with great health. And that is what's called health span. What they're really saying is hang in there. On a vernacular way, I like to say, let's pretend you could live to 130. Pretend. What would you do? How would you live your life? You probably would eat better, exercise more, have life purpose, think about going back to school, doing all the things that you think you're too old to do. And if you're a young person or you were creating school curriculum, you would think very differently about how you would have your everything from school lunches to create your education system. So thinking as though we're going to be able to live at least that long is itself a sea change. And if you listen to folks like Aubrey De Grey, other geroscientists, they're saying that their research and breakthroughs are incremental. The longer you live healthy, the more likely you are to be living at a time when these breakthroughs will become real. That's really all that longevitists are saying. So that when you express it that way, we're not talking about, are you going to live forever if you take this pill? That is wrong. You will live longer, healthier, and happier, even in this moment, if you live as though you're going to live many, many decades ahead. Now, when we come back, I want to talk to you, Aubrey, about something that disturbs me greatly. You are on the Institute of Ethics and Emerging Technologies, and a lot of the breakthroughs are in the field of technology and AI and so on. And my question is always, who's going to have access to these breakthroughs? To me, that's an ethical question. And let's discuss that as soon as we return. One of the things that you've told me over and over again is that your biggest barrier to travel is money. What else is new? Well, we have now affiliated and partnered with all the booking sites that you would be interested in. That's booking.com, that's hotels.com, that's Expedia, that's Guides, Get Your Guide, and of course TripAdvisor, the big one. So if you are going to be booking, you're going to want to use the links that we provide for you because there are discounts there. There's also ease and convenience. It also does something for all of us. It is true, yes, I get a small donation in the event that you book through any of these sites, but I plow it right back in so that we can have more research, more clout in the world of anti-ageism and tourism, and get you even more discounts. So please use these because it'll be good for you and it'll be good for your family. And it really puts a lot more money in your pocket and makes life easy. How do you do that? Well, you simply go to our discount page on agelesstraveler.com/discounts. You'll see that also in the show notes. So use it and never stop traveling. We have conversations here that are very down to earth. I had a conversation with a listener just the other day because she had lost all of her friends who wanted to travel. And those who were still around said, no, they're too old, they can't go. Now, in her case, she was 81 years old. She had been to about 35 or 36 countries, and she wanted to go more. And she said, Adrian, I got to make new friends. I have to make younger friends. Great, except that. Why leave yourself out of the world? Why not participate in this world? Why not think that you can still, because you're healthy, be happy? And that's what we do here. And we're here today with someone who you may not think of him as the poster boy for happiness, but in many ways he is, because what he is saying is have faith in the science of the future, live so that you will see that science in the future. His name is Aubrey De Grey. Anybody in the field of geroscience or aging knows him. He has 2 books, both of them you can find on Amazon, The Mitochondrial Free Radical Theory of Aging, which really started this consideration that aging may be a disease that's curable or at least approachable as a disease so that it can be prevented and cured. And then more recently, Ending Aging. He's just started a new institute. He originally started Sense Institute, which is still going strong here in California. And I would say that I'm privileged because the BBC, The Guardian, Fortune Magazine, Washington Post, TED, Popular Science, everybody in the whole world, even Playboy has interviewed Aubrey De Grey. So thank you so much for being with us, Aubrey. I want to go back to that. Where can people find you? Because they're going to, you have your books on Amazon, but they're going to want to follow up on some of your thinking. So where is the best website to go to?
Sure, yes. I mean, of course, things are moving very fast. My book, Ending Aging, which was a relatively general audience book, is very much a good place to start. It's quite technical, but not like prohibitively technical. It's something that non-specialists ought to be able to get through if you have enough persistence and you just read it slowly, because it is it doesn't cut any corners.
I've read it. It's not a slog. Don't let him fool you. It's pretty good. But he teaches you things, so you have to put in your jargon hat once in a while.
Yeah. So the thing is that even though that book is 15 years old, it's still a good place to start, and that's a good thing because, of course, there's been a huge amount of progress over those years. But that progress has been pretty much what we had predicted it would be. It's the right kind of things, the same kind of things have happened. In other words, the paradigm, the thought, the way of thinking that was expressed in that book 15 years ago is still the prevailing way of thinking about all of this.
Yes.
But damage repair is the way to go. Of course, progress has been made in implementing those damage repair therapies. So, yeah, I mean, that's where to go. My new foundation, Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, LEV Foundation, it is the embodiment, I guess, of the things that I do right now, being kind of the tip of the spear, being, trying to take things forward another couple of steps beyond what other people are doing. LEV Foundation, Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, is there to take the next step, to be a progression from there and to really finish the job.
Now, when you say finish the job, what we have, let's say, for the consumer, for the people listening now, we've got 3 or 4 tranches, I call them, that people go through if they care about their own longevity. One we've mentioned 500 times, their own lifestyle, their own behavior, what they can do in the exercise and so on. The second thing is medicine, drugs that they're already being prescribed because they have a condition, a thyroid condition, a cholesterol condition, high blood pressure, whatever it is. They should be very diligent about that. The third one that's in the face of the consumer every day is the nutraceuticals, whether it's vitamins, whether it's senolytics, all the fancy names for the way you can spend $60 a month on a pill that you're not quite sure is working, brain health and so on. And the last one is what you're talking about, looking at and understanding their own bioclocks, their own biomedical conditions that are not diseases, but where they are using the devices and waiting for the breakthroughs. Now, what you seem to be saying is that's the tranche you're in now. You're looking for what isn't there yet. Can you divulge to us 1 or 2 of those things that are the prize in your eyes?
Sure. Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Adrian. I'm a PhD, not an MD. In other words, I focus on stuff that does not yet exist. I focus on developing things that will do better than anything that does yet exist. So those other categories you mentioned, whether it's lifestyle or supplements or whatever, those are all very well, but we all have to recognize that they are not the Holy Grail. They are only going to achieve a very limited amount of postponement of the health problems of late life. Therefore, we need things that are much better. And so, yes, my focus is on developing high-tech things. Some of them will be stem cell therapies. Some of them will be gene therapies. Some of them will be immune therapies. And furthermore, for sure and certain, we're going to have to be applying multiple therapies to the same people at the same time. We're going to have to be doing things in combination. So the flagship project of my new foundation, the Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, is precisely that, to take large numbers of mice and do a whole bunch of things to them, but only starting when they are already in middle age, but doing a whole bunch of things and trying to extend their remaining healthy longevity and thus their total longevity by a much larger factor than what has been achieved in the past.
So you understand, everybody listening, why I care so much about the thinking of Aubrey, because he does tend to be a leader. He's one of those folks that everybody will poo-poo until they do it themselves years later. So I've always, look, I'm at an age, and most of my listeners are at an age when they can't go back to when they were 30 and do better. They're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and older. And very few are looking at protocols for better aging, starting with the older adult. But you are. And so this is extremely good news. But let's go to that ethical question. What you have just listed off, Aubrey, is what I hoped you were going to say. The stem cells, the gene therapies. We've talked about this. We've had Liz Parrish on the show and so on. Many others. It's expensive. And we don't have a government that really puts money into prevention, which means we're on our own. We don't even have insurance companies that cover those therapies. We have people going to other countries to get some of those therapies that already exist. Now, from the ethical point of view, where do you see this? Does this ever bother you that you may be creating things that are only for a certain strata of our community?
So this is a painful question, not for the reason that you think it is.
Okay.
The reason it's painful is because the answer is so easy, but people are so resistant to the answer. The answer is simply that from a completely mercenary economic perspective, it is going to be completely clear that any government, whether it's a US government with healthcare being done through insurance or whether it's a more European system with a single payer, it doesn't matter. The point is, any government is going to see that it is economically preferable to make these therapies available to everybody who is old enough to need them as soon as they exist, as soon as they're available to anybody. The reason that that's true is simply because keeping people alive in the state that they're in today, in old age, namely a state in which we cannot do anything about their health, is unbelievably expensive. The vast majority of the medical expenditure of the Western world, whether it's the US or any other country, is spent on the health problems of late life. And if those health problems are simply avoided because we're keeping people youthful however long ago they were born, then that goes away. And so it makes economic sense to spend money to make it go away, even if those therapies are initially quite expensive. It often goes under the moniker of the longevity dividend.
Yes.
But it's had almost no effect on public policy. And the fundamental reason it's had no effect is because policymakers, elected representatives, simply think that the premise isn't true. In other words, they say, yes, we understand that if we were to invest a few $1 billion here and there to accelerate biomedical research into aging, then there's some chance that that research will bear fruit and that it will actually postpone the health problems of late life in the population by a few years. But the problem is, all they are told by the scientific community is that there is some probability that will happen. No number has been put on that. The biomedical research community in aging has shot itself spectacularly in the foot by refusing to say how likely it is that X amount of money will achieve Y amount of postponement of the health problems of late life. And because of that, the people who actually make the decisions and write the checks are assigning the number 0 to that probability, which means that the entire argument collapses.
We go in and take a little bit of a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the essential question. How can the geroscience community, the research community, the communication community that I'm in, the media community, make changes in your opinion? I'm here with Aubrey De Grey, and while he has incredible amounts of credentials, the most outstanding to me is he's a very interesting guy. Don't you guys go anywhere. You know, for many years, I had a radio call-in show, almost about 20 years. I'm very used to hearing your questions and answering them. And if I can't do that, I have a battalion of experts who can. Do you have questions about travel, about volunteering, perhaps just about volunteering, or even your next step in life after retirement? Well, if you have those questions, please ask Adrian. Very simple to do it. Go to fanlist.com/agelesstraveler. That's fanlist.com/agelesstraveler. You'll see it in the show notes. And ask me by text, by voicemail. It's free. We will get back to you. And if we get enough questions, we'll start to live stream and you'll be able to ask me on the air. fanlist.com/agelesstraveler. So Aubrey, tell us just once again the website for your new foundation. And then I want to talk about this issue of getting the public on board.
So the website of the foundation is levf.org, Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation, LEVF. I do want to recommend, in terms of my books, that people should look at Ending Aging. Now, my earlier book, Mitochondrial Theory of Aging, is very technical.
Yes.
So, I wouldn't start there. But Ending Aging, we tried to make it a little bit less technical. Yeah. So essentially, I think it's all about moving the needle in public opinion. So the reason I've spent so much of my time doing media over the past 15, 20 years is basically because I've understood since the beginning that until the public really understand that aging is a medical problem that we are within striking distance of solving, until that happens, there's never going to be any change in policy. At the end of the day, your elected representatives have one goal in life, which is to get re-elected. And therefore, public policy follows public opinion. It does not lead public opinion. And so I've been working on public opinion. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's been changing over time. We've made quite a bit of progress. A large part of that progress has been because of progress that's actually happened at the bench, in laboratories around the world, which have shown that this or that thing that people thought was impossible is actually possible. But we need to do plenty more of that. There will come a tipping point when we've made enough progress that the public just say, yeah, you know what, this is really true. We are getting there. But we need to go a bit further than we have so far before that happens. At the end of the day, this is all about what you can really call preventative medicine. Aging is the process that goes on throughout life that results in the health problems that we're all so familiar with. And we just need to get the public happy with the idea that the right way, the only really effective way to stop people from getting those pathologies of late life is to intervene preventatively and to address the things that are happening throughout life that eventually cause those health problems.
When for Sense, I believe you had the Methuselah Institute, and you actually had a Methuselah Mouse Prize. So again, I'm going to give you a little challenge on that. One of the things I think that's difficult for the public is that a lot of these breakthroughs occur in small animals. And now I know there are dog projects, but even so, as human beings, we separate ourselves so much from animals. But biologically, in the lab, what you call at the bench, these breakthroughs often begin with animals, and even the FDA expects that and funds that sort of thing. Do you think that we can make a different kind of faster type of lab testing where we have more human tests, or is that too dangerous?
Well, so I have a couple of answers to that. The first one actually comes back to what you said about dogs during your question. And that's really important. So there's a bunch of groups now, both private sector and academic, doing work on dogs and on companion animals. And this is insanely valuable, partly because they have, in various ways, a greater level of similarity to humans than what like laboratory mice do. But also because, there's an awful lot of people out there who actually care about their dogs. So, the ability to do this work becomes, we have a whole new dimension in terms of like the funding from people who actually want their own dogs to do better and so on. So, I'm all over that. I think that's a really important component of the longevity field has moved over the past few years. I'm really in favor of it. But beyond that, of course, we do need to get to the clinical trial aspect. Absolutely. We need to be looking at humans because, you can't replace humans. However, a huge amount of what we need to do in terms of moving the needle in terms of public opinion revolves not just about on the actual results that come out of experiments such as clinical trials, but it revolves around what people say. When I say people, I mean the influencers, the acknowledged experts. So for the longest time, I've been the only acknowledged expert out there saying, we're in striking distance of doing something about aging. Now we've got a few other people like George Church and David Sinclair out there and Barzilai saying, you know what, this is going well. I believe that if they were going only a little bit further in terms of talking about timeframes for likely progress, then yes, you'd get Oprah Winfrey out there saying, this is likely to happen. Therefore, we should really be, as a society, trying to make it happen a bit sooner. And, that would be the tipping point. Thereafter, my job is done, advocacy-wise. A flagship research program of my new foundation, the LEV Foundation, is going to be exactly that, pushing the amount of progress we have in the laboratory with mice forward enough that my prominent colleagues will feel able to say, you know what, this is game over. We are on our way. We are going to get there in the foreseeable future.
What you call the influencers, the celebrity influencers, is important. I managed to get on Oprah's show 4 times, and it actually did make a huge difference in the way people invested. It was about money, not about health at that time. So you're absolutely right. You think that they're just an inch away, these influentials in the field of geroscience. But what I could tell you is that the influentials in the field of celebrity status and media are very far away. And yet, when it comes to beauty, when it comes to having your face look younger, they're right there and they're very influential. And I just have wondered, my last question to you on this part of it, do you see a connection there, the fact that we have taken so much and spent so much personally on our looks that we can use that as some leverage to explain how much we will feel better inside if we care about prevention? I don't know if we can make a marriage there.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, this is a very profound question, Adrian. This is a really great question because, we've, as you say, we've put so much money into the cosmetic side, but, one way to look at why that has happened, why there is such a market there, is that it's all about denial. It's all about trying to, find new ways, everywhere we can. It's like the more progress we make in cosmetics, the more problems we are making for ourselves in terms of getting people to take what's going on inside their bodies seriously. Of course, I don't want to oversimplify or overgeneralize here. Fact is, everybody's different. Some people will be receptive, susceptible, vulnerable, shall we say, to that kind of logic, and some people won't. But yeah, it's double-edged.
We can do a lot better than that. Now, to motivate you even further, to get you that companionship you need as you travel, please become a member of our Facebook Salon. Please subscribe to our Tuesday newsletters. It comes to you every single week. Gives you the information, the discounts, the tools you need to be able to travel all your life. And of course, listen to some of our companions who have wonderful podcasts like The Reinvention Rebel. You read all about Wendy Battles in our newsletter, every single newsletter this month, in the month of July. So these are ways that empower you to never stop traveling.